Welcome to the third video of Unit 3 on ancient Greece. This video specifically talks about Greece politics. So this should be the front of the second page and the back of the second page in your notes packet, and it should say guided notes on Greece politics. We will talk about the makeup of how politics was done in ancient Greece, and we will cover specifics of two of the most important city-states, the most powerful city-states in Greece, which is Athens and Sparta. City-states we have already covered in class, but city-states are those cities that have their own political units, so they run their own way. The Greeks became overcrowded, and they began to spread out and started new colonies. These became city-states. Other words for you to be familiar with that we have mentioned. A polis is a Greek city-state. It was the basic political unit of Greece. The polis was designed to promote civic and commercial life. So government comes from the word civic, government, and then commercial is everyday life, interacting with others, trading of goods, things like that. The Acropolis, the upper part of the city where the temples and public buildings were located. The Acropolis sat atop the polis. Okay, so if you take a look at this image, all that would be up here would be considered the Acropolis. And these are images of the Acropolis, some during the day, some at night. And that structure, the largest structure there on the Acropolis in Athens, is the Parthenon that has the statue of Athena in it. Another term to be familiar with is agora. The agora was the open-air marketplace of a Greek polis. It was usually below the Acropolis. The nice climate of Greece allowed for people to be outdoors and take an active part in commerce and politics. Commerce is dealing with money, so trading of goods, selling of goods, and then politics, dealing with government. The agora is basically where everyone would come during the day, and by everyone I mean in ancient Athens that would be males who were citizens, and we'll get to that. They would come to the agora, they would talk politics, they would buy goods, they would socialize, and all of those things. And these are images of what the agora looks like, the area that they would all meet. In Greek politics, in Athens, citizens had had political rights and were responsible for participating in the government. If you were a free adult male, 18 or over, you were expected to participate in government. If you were a woman, a foreigner, or a slave, you had no political rights. No women had any political rights. Foreigners are people who were not born in Athens. They came to Athens from other places, even other city-states. They would be considered foreigners. They had no political rights. And slaves had no political rights. Now, it's important to note that in ancient Greece, slavery is not based on race. Slavery is based on if an individual was a prisoner of war or if they have debts that they could not repay. They would become slaves. So only free adult males, 18 and over, were considered citizens and had the right to vote in ancient Greece and ancient Athens. Athens is going to go through 4 government changes before they get to the one that our own government today is based on. And we're going to go through each of those 4 stages. It starts with a monarchy. A monarchy is a government ruled by one person, usually a king or a queen. Monarchy, one comes from mono. Mono means one. And so one person will rule, a king or a queen. Please take note in your notes packet. The left side of your packet is asking you to write the name of the stage of the government with the symbols that it is meant to represent. So please make sure you are doing that as you go through these next 3 slides. The second type of government was an aristocracy, a government ruled by the nobles or upper class. So the aristocracy is a government ruled by the nobles or upper class. So this would be a whole group of people who rule, and they're the ones who are in charge, who control things. The third stage was a tyranny, government ruled by one person who uses force to control the government. Usually what happens is a tyrant or a person who rules a tyranny will come to power by appealing to the poor for support. So they will speak to the poor about the injustices that they are enduring, so the difficulties in their lives, and how this person can fix those things. And so if you have the support of the poor, most often that's going to be a larger majority than the upper class, and so you have a lot of support behind you. So a tyrant is someone who takes over by force. There are two specific tyrants that we're going to cover from ancient Athens. The first one is Draco. In 621 BC, he became a tyrant, part of the tyranny government in ancient Athens. He wrote the first legal code to keep peace between the rich and the poor. It established rules about contracts and property ownership. The punishment for most things was death. The term draconian, which means harsh, comes from his name. So again, we see this theme of harsh punishments for breaking the rules. We saw this with Hammurabi's Code, we saw this in Mesopotamia, and we saw this with legalism in China. And here we see it under Draco in ancient Athens. If you have ever seen the movies or read the books Harry Potter, you would know Draco Malfoy. He's kind of the evil-esque character. So if that helps you remember that Draco was a tyrant who had the harsh punishments, that's probably a pretty good way to remember him. Another tyrant that we will talk about is Solon in 594 BC. He was chosen by the aristocrats to lead Athens. Remember, the aristocrats are those upper class nobles. He is going to reform the laws. This is what he is known for. He outlaws debt slavery. So if you remember, if you were a slave in ancient Athens, there were two ways you became a slave. One, you were captured during wartime, or two, you had debts you could not repay. Solon is going to outlaw that debt slavery, that you would have to become a slave if you could not repay debts. He also allowed all citizens into politics. Any citizen could bring charges against wrongdoers, and he encouraged overseas trade. So he did a lot of reforms while he was in charge. And then the fourth type of government. So we had a monarchy, an aristocracy, a tyranny, and now we have democracy, government ruled by its citizens, either directly or through representatives. So this is where we base our own government system on what we have today in the US. So there are two types of democracy: direct democracy and representative democracy. There is a direct democracy in ancient Athens, which means government is ruled directly by the citizens, not through representatives. So every citizen was expected to participate. They would have public debates where every citizen, again, adult male, 18 or over, free adult male, would be expected to come and participate in these public debates, discuss issues, and they would all vote. A representative democracy, on the other hand, is where individuals vote for a representative to speak for them in these issues. Generally, direct democracy can occur in areas of smaller populations, but it is not feasible in something the size of the United States, and so that's where representative democracy comes from, where representatives are elected by the people. In the democracy in ancient Athens, the duties of a citizen were to be a member of the assembly, or the ecclesia, for the discussion of city policy, and to vote. It was a requirement for every citizen to vote. Again, free adult males. So that is all for ancient Greece, Athens. A separate city-state was Sparta. Sparta is going to be pretty much a polar opposite of what Athens was. Sparta is going to have one government structure, an oligarchy, where power is held by a small group of citizens, usually wealthy. And in Sparta, their society is going to be incredibly militaristic, meaning society is based on the military. So in Athens, when they got to their stage of democracy, there's going to be a big focus on the arts and on literature and on trade. And in Sparta, they're going to be more self-sufficient, meaning they're going to produce everything they need right there in Sparta. And they're going to be focused very much on military. Between 600 and 371 BC, Sparta had the most powerful army in Greece. Athens had the most powerful navy. Sparta had the most powerful army. And in Sparta, boys at the age of 7 left home to train and live in army barracks. And they would stay there until their teenage years. So they would leave home and they would not grow up with their families again until they were of a grown age and they were done with their training. So at birth, a child was checked, and if children were seen as defective or too weak, or they didn't believe that they were going to be good fighters, they were left on a hillside to die. If a child passed this test of if they were believed to be well-suited or not, then they were bathed in wine and given to a helot, a captured person of Sparta, much like slaves, and this helot would be responsible for nursing this child, for raising this child so their mother would not spoil them. They would still live for males for their first 7 years with their family, but they would largely be raised by this helot. At age 7, a boy would start his military training, and military training consisted of learning to cheat, lie, and steal. Boys were trained in physical fitness and fighting styles. Boys were also largely starved, and this was so that they could learn how to be cunning or how to hunt or steal. In a lot of cases, for survival, they would steal their own food. Sparta took over territory of its neighbors and made them slaves. Their military was very important to them. They had so many in the military that they had the power to simply take over the territory of their neighbors. In Spartan society, there were two groups that governed, the Assembly and the Council of Elders. The Assembly was made up of all free adult males, and they were responsible for electing officials and voting on issues. The Council of Elders proposed laws for the Assembly to vote on, controlled education, court cases, and ran the military. So in Spartan society, this is how society would have been organized. Ruling landowners would be at the top, free non-citizens would be in the middle, and slaves and those helots, those individuals who would raise the boys, or all children actually, would be at the bottom level of society. Spartan women, women in Sparta had more rights than women in the most of the rest of Greece. In Athens, for example, women very rarely left the home. Most often, they were expected to stay at home and raise the children and make the food. Oftentimes, the only time they left the home was to gather food. Whereas in ancient Sparta, women were trained in physical fitness and expected to exercise, bear strong children, specifically sons, if at all possible. And women were expected to be the defense of their homes if they were attacked while men were away. So if the men were off fighting, the women should be capable of defending Sparta from attack. Sparta was considered backward and uncultured by other city-states of Greece. They were not interested in art or culture, and they didn't write down their history, but are considered by many to have been one of the greatest militaries that ever lived. They were very much a group that kept to themselves. This was a society that kept to themselves, other than the fact that they expanded into the territories all around them. We will talk more about how Athens and Sparta actually interact as we move forward, including a war that they fought against one another. This is the end of the notes on ancient Greece politics. Please make sure you have answered all of the questions and prompts in the side of your notes packet as well.